So you surveyed 400 likely Ohio voters?
Yes.
Is that right?
So one thing I think might be useful to mention is kind of what the argument from the other side is, and I'll be as fair about this as I can. And their argument is basically this, that there are brick and mortar businesses that are based here in Columbus and elsewhere across the state, and when they make sales to people in their stores, they have to collect sales tax for every single one of them. And meanwhile, there are online competitors who may not have a physical presence in Ohio, who may have a warehouse across the country somewhere. They don't have to collect sales tax, and that yields this unfair advantage to this online retailer, that they can't compete with. And they say we need to level the playing field, and so that's why the Marketplace Fairness Act makes sense, is to level the playing field, to allow states to force everybody to collect sales tax for those sorts of things. And my response to that is this, that what they're asking for is actually the exact opposite of a level playing field. And just to use an example, I am a Virginia resident, and yet if I walk into any store here in Columbus today and purchase something, they will charge me the Columbus, Ohio sales tax. They don't ask me where I'm from. They don't have to figure out the fact that where I'm from in Arlington County has a slightly higher sales tax rate than the rest of Virginia. They don't have to figure out, is this item exempt from sales taxation in his state or not? Does it meet this definition or that one? Is there a sales tax holiday there today or not? They don't have to do any of that. They have to know one sales tax code for here in Columbus, Ohio. They have to be accountable to one revenue agency here in Ohio. If there is a dispute about what the amount is, or if there's some sort of an issue that needs to be litigated in some way, they would go to the courthouse here in Ohio, not across the country somewhere. And so what the Marketplace Fairness Act would do is create a totally unlevel playing field, where if you're a brick and mortar retailer, you get to use this simple, easy standard of collecting based on where you're located, whereas you would be forcing online businesses to have to jump through all of these hoops to figure out tax obligations across the country. There are 46 states with sales taxes. There are 9,998 separate taxing jurisdictions across the country. So asking online businesses to be accountable for all of those, when you are only asking brick and mortar businesses to be accountable for the one where they're physically located, is the exact opposite of a level playing field. So the concerns that they express are not crazy, but the Marketplace Fairness Act is this sort of the pendulum swinging dramatically in the other direction, and in the meantime also opening up Pandora's box in terms of state tax power and all of the other issues that we mentioned. So I do think it's important to acknowledge that and kind of parse through it a little bit, because the concerns aren't insane, it's just that the solution frankly is.
Did any of your poll questions address that concern?
To some extent. So if you can go back to some of the earlier questions, and we asked people about whether or not collection should be done based on the location of the buyer. So we did sort of get at that a little bit. We didn't kind of do any specific testing of the kind of level playing field stuff or what have you. There have been other polls that have done that. But what I think is interesting, and something that Pete didn't mention about some of these questions, is we kind of ask them different ways, and actually the results don't change a ton depending on how you ask it. And there are two questions that are similar about that are the crux of which is asking, should we empower states to collect these sales taxes across their borders on businesses that aren't located there? And there's one that's a very generic formulation of that, which is one of the earlier questions. And there's a later one which is a much stronger formulation, which says, the one about auditing and taking it to New York courts. And we sort of did that intentionally to ask the stronger version of that question. And actually the results were a little bit less strong, slightly. Just maybe that's just some natural variation, but the point is that there wasn't some big jump in the numbers in the stronger question, which to us indicates that there is kind of a basic understanding at the core here of what this is about. And, it's not really about just dollars and cents. That's kind of often the framing. There's a University of Tennessee study that claims that Ohio is missing out on a little over $300 million worth of revenue from this. It turns out actual more reasonable assumptions based on states that have actually started to collect based on what their estimates were. It's about 20% of those numbers. So you're looking at more like 60 or 70 billion in that case. But that is just an infinitesimally small amount of Ohio's state budget. And so it's not really about dollars and cents. I mean, to some extent, everything with government is. But what this is really about is the nature of state power, is whether or not the internet is something that's going to empower individuals or empower state governments. And so I think that, you know, we didn't kind of get directly at the kind of level playing field questions, but I think that a lot of that stuff sort of comes through, that people understand that this isn't just your average sort of dollars and cents.